In a world brimming with complexity, few creatures embody harmony like the honeybee. With tireless precision, she dances from bloom to bloom, each motion guided by millennia upon millennia of instinct, each act in service to the whole. And then there are the beekeepers, watchful stewards of this ancient symbiosis. Part agri-scientist, part poet, they move along their hives with the efficiency of Moe, Larry, and Curly, tending to the bees' needs as best they can comprehend, and with the infrequency of a waterfall in the Sahara, sometimes running off, flapping and flailing like a penguin on a hot sidewalk. This is their journey.
Welcome to Bee Love Beekeeping, presented by our great friends and partners in beekeeping, Mann. Today we're having a discussion with a very experienced third-generation beekeeper in the heat of southern Arizona. If you live outside the U.S., you might not be familiar with their climate, which consists of 100-degree days all summer long and no real winter to speak of. In fact, 110 degrees plus really isn't that out of the ordinary. That's 43 degrees Celsius if you're using that scale. And that reminds me that all beekeeping is local. What works in Arizona won't work in Alaska or Canada or Scotland. But even more than that, what works at my apiary may not work for someone even 20 miles away if the climate and vegetation are different. I've thrown together a quick list of questions to ask yourself and other beekeepers in your area. Once you get those answers, it'll help form the way that you tend the bees. So let's go from here. How severe is your winter? How hot is the summer? And what about humidity? When are the nectar flows? When are my bees most likely to swarm or have pressure from pests and diseases? And what about local pesticide use? And how can all of this change from year to year? And it does. Bottom line, get in touch with your surroundings, other beekeepers in your specific area, and of course, get in tune with your bees. I'd like to welcome back to the show Monica King. Monica, how are you?
Great. Hi. Thanks for having me.
It's so good to see you again. If I remember right, you were really one of our first half a dozen guests or so on the show a couple of years ago. We've come a long ways since then. We're going to hit our 100th episode here soon.
Wow.
And we've added video and done all kinds of things since, and it's going gangbusters.
Wow. Congratulations.
I just appreciate our guests so much and our sponsors so much, and especially our listeners who have taken us from nowhere to being one of the top beekeeping podcasts, and we just really appreciate it a ton. And you're part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. That's awesome. Great to hear.
For those that didn't hear your first interview, and there's probably a lot of people because that was very early on, I'd love you to take just a minute or two and give us an idea of who you are. You can mention third generation beekeeper, where you are, some of that kind of stuff, so we get to know Monica, and then we're going to talk beekeeping.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So yeah, I'm third generation. I grew up the daughter of Dave and Linda Mixa. My dad passed away last year. He's one of the pioneers in queen production and actually shipping queen cells. He was one of the, I think he was the first beekeeper to ship queen cells. And so growing up in that, I learned to find queen bees really quickly because my allowance was a quarter for every queen bee I found and caged. But if you accidentally killed her, you owed Dad full price. So we got to be pretty quick if we wanted a nice little allowance there, a little extra spending money after school or whatever. But no, growing up, my dad was very much he studied under Dr. Morris. He studied under Norman Gary at Cornell University just as a little research assistant when he was in 11th grade. And then he went on to the USDA lab in Madison, Wisconsin, and became lifelong friends with Emmett Harp and many researchers. So Dad instilled in us, all of his kids, there's 6 of us, 5 of us are commercial beekeepers. And so he instilled the importance of nutrition and being good to the bees, because basically if you're good to them, they're going to be good back to us. That's how I grew up, is thinking like a bee is what, Dad would always say. So with that was in Florida. We were actually migratory at first when I was little. My dad had his own semi. We would truck bees from Florida to Wisconsin and vice versa, back and forth, until Dad just became a very popular queen producer. And then we stayed most of the time in Florida. And then I ended up in Arizona. I actually came out to hike the Grand Canyon, fell in love with the state, met my husband, and basically moved out here in 94 and started working with Africanized bees. And so those are now my specialty. I can't raise queen bees out here. I tried to get a drone saturated area, European drone I could not do it. So I just decided, if you can't beat them, join them. So now I do live bee removals of Africanized bees from unwanted locations, and then I change their genetics by replacing their queen. So that's kind of like my thing. And I teach beekeeping. I think I'm at 62 students now. And when you take my class, I never leave your side. So they've got my cell phone number. I'm constantly working with my students, making sure that they have direction even after class.
So you mean 62 active students right now?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, I'm proud of them.
I was looking at your website and I love this. You've got classes and workshops, everything from, let's see, advanced beekeeping and keeping native bees, and everything about Africanized and overwintering and all kinds of things. And I mean, who would know more? So compared to some of us that are first generation beekeepers and have only been doing it for a little over a decade, and I feel like I'm never going to learn it all.
Oh, you don't?
But I don't think
No.
anybody does.
No, you're correct. That's one thing Dad wanted to instill in all of his kids, is that there's no experts when it comes to beekeeping. So with that said, we're always students to Mother Nature and to our bees.
Since you brought up Africanized bees, I want to touch on that first, and then we're going to be talking about homesteading and some other kinds of things like that we haven't talked too much about on the show recently. We have talked about Africanized bees a little bit in episodes recently, but tell me what it's like, because we have this scary image of killer bees, just like the murder hornets. Somebody puts a name on them and we think they're out to kill all human beings. But are the majority of feral colonies in your area Africanized? I'm going to throw out a bunch of questions at one time.
Okay.
So there's question number 1. How do you tell the difference? And just how hot are they to work with?
We have a USDA lab here in Tucson, Carl Hayden Research Center. And in 2008, they did genetic sampling from the south rim of the Grand Canyon all the way down to the Mexico border. And 98% of those sampled came back as Africanized hybrids. So basically what us beekeepers do in this area is, if we meet a hive that is not in the hands of a beekeeper, we just automatically assume it's Africanized hybrid. There's really no way for the average person to be able to say, okay, that's an Africanized bee and that's a European bee. You have to look under a microscope, check their wing structure, or send them out to a lab for genetics. So we just automatically say, okay, that's going to be an Africanized hive. And we treat them with respect, and we go in thinking that, well, these can be bees that can get out of hand quickly. So I only do my removals at night for safety and containment. And that's when bees are home.
It's also not as hot.
It's not, right. I mean, like, I got triple digits in the middle of the day. And so I'm in a full bee suit. I have one bee suit I absolutely love. People are always trying to sell me other bee suits. And I'm like, No, I only use this one bee suit. I trust that suit, and she's great. I do use nitrile gloves because I don't like crushing bees. Africanized bees don't like leather gloves. If they sting the gloves, you get the pheromone all over the place. And so with the nitriles, it fakes the majority of them out until my hands get all sticky and they start sticking to my gloves and stuff like that. But with that said, how cantankerous can they be? When I first started the bee removals, it was like 1 in 20 were that killer bee, the ones that would make the paper kind of bee. And then, like every year, it just kind of seems to get like more and more of them are getting more agitated. At the beginning of this year, I would say 1 in 2, 50% were that kind of angry bee. But I think it was more because they were hangry. We've been having really bad drought conditions. The environment, the habitat for them has not been the best. Even across the board, across the nation, we've had some researchers come out and say, hey, the bees are hangry. And they've put out something about protein in the pollen is not what it used to be. And that the bees are becoming a little bit more agitated or defensive when they get that way. So now, with these rains that we've been having, and I've gotten 3 inches in the past month, and now the flowers are going crazy and the bees are expanding, and those Africanized girls, they're a lot sweeter now. So I would have to say I put a lot of money on that. I would bet money that that actually has a lot to do with all the bees across the board, whether no matter your genetic line. But the Africanized bees, they're used to living on their own. And I think that I did 2 removals with the American honey queen. Our American honey queen is actually staying in Tucson for school, and she's been starting to help me on bee removals. One of them was a beautiful, healthy, gorgeous, wild colony in someone's backyard. She was living in a wash bin, an overturned wash bin. The other one was in an irrigation box, and that hive was struggling. She was weak. She had some sort of brood issue going on. She had ant problems. She had all these. And so those bees were a little crankier than those healthy bees.
I don't get why more people don't do removals at night. It makes sense what you're telling me.
Yes, we have people doing bee removals during the day, and they will agitate the bees, and they're like, oh my goodness, we're going to have to kill them. We're going to have to use pesticides. We're going to have to take these out because they're just really nasty bees. If you do them at night, yes, the beekeeper might be getting more stings because they crawl more. I use a red light. I don't use a white light. Keeps them calmer. Of course, they're all home. It's better for the homeowner. I don't have any issues with neighbors, pets. Everything is so safe. I mean, yeah, I don't know why.
Everybody that's doing swarm removals and cutouts and everything else, give it a try. And as far as the red light, are you taking a headlamp and putting some kind of a red thing on it, or are you just buying red lights or
So I use a rechargeable, yes, lantern type. So I use multiple rechargeable lanterns that stay in the red mode all around us. If you put it on your veil, you get this weird reflection and it's difficult to work with a headlight. So I have all these rechargeable red lights and they work great. You can actually see it. If you change, so it's got multiple modes on my lanterns, and you can change it to the white light and the bees just become really agitated. And then if you change it back to red, they calm down again. I highly recommend doing the removals at night with a red light.
Okay. Now, on a personal note, you mentioned nitrile gloves, and I love nitrile gloves. That's what I use all the time. I love being able to get them all gooey and gunky and just pull them off and throw them away. They're
Yes.
not expensive. But my hands sweat so much inside there. Am I the only one?
No, you're not the only one. My family, they use cornstarch inside, but then you get this really thick, muddy cornstarch icky. You're not the only one. Yeah.
I didn't know if there was a secret, like baby powder in there or something that I haven't tried or
Well, that's what the cornstarch. I do know a friend of mine uses these cotton inserts underneath, but then I'm like, well, now you got something you have to wash. I just go ahead and just deal with it. Yeah.
you just get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing before we leave this Africanized topic, I've had a couple of different people on recently on the show that are in Southern California, so not that far from you and not quite as hot of an environment. But What they're telling me is the majority of bees that they're working with are Africanized hybrids, but they believe, and most of this has not been genetically tested and stuff, they believe that they have hybridized so many times over so many generations that they're a really great hybrid. They don't change out queens because of a few things. One, they don't have that nasty of dispositions anymore after enough generations. They're hardy. They're fairly varroa resistant compared to some regular European honeybees. And they just think they're great hardy bees. And they've learned to live with them. Like I said, they're just not that nasty. Are yours not to that point, or what do you think the difference is?
So we have a lot of areas that our Africanized bees get into, and I think that our concentration is a lot higher in this area. We have mine shafts, we have pack rat nests, we have saguaro cacti. We have a high concentration of Africanized, and literally, we had somebody come from Yuma, Arizona, and he thought, well, I'm going to get into bee removals in Tucson because there's a need. I'm going to do live removals. And he got out of it. He used to run 5,000 colonies in an agricultural setting. He was a manager of one of the pollination contracts and stuff. And he goes, I've never met bees like this. And so I think your Africanization defensive capabilities is basically concentrated to separate areas.
Quick break to discuss what just might be on your mind right now. Come on, admit it. You're imagining the upcoming honey harvest. Because no matter where you live in the world, it's either here now or it will be in the near future. And Mann Lake is making it so easy to plan for. Click on over to Mann Lake's website for an amazing selection of extractors, filters, bottling supplies, uncapping knives, supplies for comb honey, everything, and I mean everything you'll need. But if you aren't there quite yet, and the honey flow is right around the corner, make sure you have extra supers on hand. You never can have too many or be too prepared. And right now, Mann Lake is offering podcast listeners $10 off your next order. Just enter code MLBLOVE10 at checkout. That's manlakeltd.com, discount code MLBLOVE10.
So, I knew these guys when I was down at my dad's one year. These people, I think they were from Argentina. They visited to study my dad's queen rearing operation. But then what happened was I got to speak to them a little bit about them visiting Brazil, because their whole thing was they were going to be selling Brazilians nucleus colonies. And so I said, hey, when you went to Brazil, how were the bees? And they said, well, we went to this one area and we worked them without gloves on. Like, oh, okay, well, he goes, but then we went deeper away from the saturated areas. We went deeper where there was less people. And those bees were the Africanized bees that everybody's always heard about. So you got these pockets, and that's great that these people are experiencing a pocket where they're getting to have some really nice, good quality hybrids and that they don't have to requeen. But out here, every now and then, us beekeepers, we go, oh, this is going to be a great hive. She was so gentle on the removal, just the sweetest bees. And then we go in 2 weeks later and they try to kill us. They're unpredictably defensive in our area. I can't speak for California. I can only speak for here. I actually keep some of them in my spot because I have no neighbors. My closest neighbor is a half a mile away, and that's a great spot for bringing Africanized bees. But if you live in an area where we have close neighbors, animals, anything like that, they can't live there just because of that defensive capability.
Let's move on, because I wanted to talk a little bit about homesteading. This is something that you're into. Tell us a little bit about where you live and your philosophy. What animals do you have? How do you do it?
Okay, so I live on a small little section of 14 acres surrounded by a bunch of state land and large ranches. I was very lucky. My husband and I were very lucky to have this property so that we can bring bees here, the Africanized bees. On this acreage, I really firmly believe in regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture. I'm like, put your money into that. Even if you live in the city and you purchase from a small farm that practices these methods, and it's better for our environment. So I'm kind of environmentally conscious on that field. So as far as I go, it is very difficult to grow a lot of things in triple digit weather. So I'm always trying to experiment with different ways of watering, saving water, reusing water. We live off of a well. We use solar for pumping that water. So if we have a lot of cloud cover, we don't get our water pumped up. So we have to have the right amount of water containment above ground. We have a water pressure with a solar pump. So if that goes down and we can't move water, that's a whole nother thing. Try moving water by hand from, a distance. So the older I'm getting, I'm trying to figure out ways to make sure that we have these things put in place where when something goes down, we have a backup for that. Something people don't realize, but these bees will go through like a gallon of water a day to 2 gallons of water a day, depending on the size of the colony. And if you don't have that available for them, you're going to have meltdowns and stuff. So I have 7 water tanks just for the bees in different locations. I run chickens and guinea hens and quail and rabbits, and of course, enough barn cats and dogs, to help keep the predators away. I would love to have a few more animals, but I am kind of at my limit as to how much I can do and also take care of everything as far as the bees. Because I think without the bees, the teaching, the classes, being able to go get the bee removals and stuff, I might not be able to afford the homesteading because it costs a lot of money to run a homestead.
Yeah, you're not going to get rich that way.
No.
No, unless you happen to find some gold when you're digging your well or something.
Right. Exactly.
I don't know if this is practical for you. I'm on a well too where I live, and we have 2 storage tanks that add up to about 3,500 gallons. That really helps. But if we don't have power, we can't pressurize that water, so we still can't do too much with it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I have a 2,500-gallon tank right at the well. And then I have another 1,500-gallon tank up so that if we need to, we can just do,
Gravity feed.
thank you. I needed the word. I'm like, I'm missing the word. So we have the availability to have a gravity feed. So, but you get caught with your pants down every now and then where maybe the 1,500-gallon is empty when the pressure system goes out. And it was like, oh no, I have no water again. The bees' water is probably close to 2,000 gallons above ground in different holding tanks open for the bees and the dogs and everybody to be able to get that. And then I have, for the orchard, I have 50-gallon water tanks with spigots on them. Those are full so that when the water system goes down or something, I can just open those up to do a trickle out of the spigot onto the trees. So you have like backups for your backups. And this is all time consuming, labor intensive. Everybody's got all of these dreams of wanting to live like I am. And I'm like going, oh, I would love to just have you come stay a day and have you have to go fill up the generator in order to run the electric when the solar is not going. And there's just all these things. Somebody said something about having something at night, and I'm like, oh, I can't do that. That drains too much power. And so you think differently when you are trying to be as sustainable as possible in a homestead. So, yeah.
And not everybody that has a quote homestead is completely off grid, and that's okay
Right.
too.
That's true. Yeah.
It doesn't mean
Yeah.
you're a bad homesteader or something else. Do those Africanized bees bother your chickens or any of your other animals?
Oh, so yeah, I have to make sure that during a dearth that I do have some Ultra B or B Pro or AP23 sitting out for them to gather. Otherwise, they go when they try to get into the chicken's feed. So if I have that out, they prefer the supplements created by Mann. They actually prefer them over the chicken food because the chicken food has like, what is it, corn byproducts in it and stuff that powders. And so they try to gather that powder in the chicken feeders. But my chickens are symbiotic with my bees. So I do these bee removals, and Africanized bees will have mites too. So what I always do is, they're really great about creating a lot of drone brood. So I always pop the drone brood to see how bad their mite infestation is. And all of that goes to the chickens. Without the chickens, I would have no place to throw that drone brood, right? As we're on that topic there, my worst mite infestation was actually a wild Africanized hive in South Tucson that had 16 mites per set drone cell. 16. And you're like, oh, well, maybe it was a European colony, Monica. And I'm like, So I sent them off right at that time. It was like perfect timing. The University of Florida was doing some kind of genetic research, and they asked me for 6 samples of hives that I wanted tested. And I'm like, oh, I have one because this one had such a mite load. I want to know. And they came back as Africanized hybrids. I think a lot to do with the mites and their ability to be resistant is their actual immune, how compromised their immune systems are at the time from forage and stuff. The chickens help me out with that.
So, for those that haven't done mite testing that way with drone brood, explain how that works.
Basically, the best spot for a varroa to reproduce is inside a drone cell. So we just pop it open. You can use like a uncapper, like one of those little handheld uncappers, and pop the cappings off of the top of the drone cells and then look inside of them. I'll pull the larva out and you will see all these mites in different stages of growth. They could be smaller than the tip of a pin and clearish white color. I mean, you got to really have your good reading glasses on in order to see them all. So basically, you can get an idea of how bad of a mite infestation it is by looking at that drone cell. Some of my students, I'll tell them when you separate 2 brood chambers, like you have 2 deeps or something, and you pop it back and you see usually they'll build drone cells in between the frames. That's the perfect opportunity to take a peek and see if you've got any mites. So that's what we do a lot of. We also use the CO2 mite check too. I don't do a whole lot of alcohol washes unless I'm doing a specific testing on my mite treatments.
So, when you find a bad infestation like that, what's your favorite method of treatment?
Because I'm doing a bee removal and I realize that they have such a high mite load, I'll just give them a complete brood break. All the brood, worker brood, everything goes to the chickens. They start fresh. And then some people in the area like to give them like an OA treatment at that time so that you're also knocking down the mites that are on the bees themselves. I don't like doing that because I've had too many of them abscond from too much pressure that they're not used to getting. So I'll just wait until they build up a little bit, and then I'll do Varroa or Varroxasan. I do like Apagard depending on the time of the year.
I don't know if we did this the first time you were on the show or not, but all the guests that come on now, I give them an opportunity to tell one of their favorite wild and crazy beekeeping stories. This can be anything super unusual or painful or embarrassing or just crazy. And especially doing removals, you must have a ton of them. So anything come to mind right now?
Well, besides finding 18 virgin queens in one swarm.
Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. You can't just go, oh, besides that. No. Tell us that one first, then go on to the other one you were thinking about.
I had a call for this ginormous swarm. Actually, my aunt got the call. She's also a beekeeper. And she's like, Monica, you bring all your equipment. Somebody's yard is covered in swarms. And so I went down there. It was 10 miles north of the Mexico border. She goes, okay, you get the biggest one because I have most of the removal equipment. She had, let's see, there was 3 or 4 other satellite swarms around this ginormous one hanging in the tree. And it took me, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Colorado bee vac. I have 3 of the catch boxes and it filled up 3 catch boxes. So it's basically 3 deeps, right? And I brought it home and I started sorting through them and I picked out 18 virgin queens in order to make them stay because they were wanting to leave. They were just like, "Oh, we're going to leave," and every time I would grab one, there would go, I'm like going, okay, oh, there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. And that was and I was able to get them to stay in the box after I caged all 18 of them. And I gave them a couple frames of brood from one of my donor hives. And yeah, but that was the most I've found so far is 18. And the most I've heard about, my dad had a friend that found 23 virgin queens in one swarm.
We need some kind of Guinness World Record on this thing.
Yes, that would be fun.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
What was the other story you were going to tell us?
I had a cutout that was just attached to a block wall. They weren't going into the block wall. They were like a retaining wall. So they were attached to it. And then there was a tree leaning into the block wall. So they had built an open air hive just in the tree. and on the wall. And it was like this catacomb, not, like in a straight line or whatever, back to back. This thing was just like all melted and molded and like had cavities to it. It was so strange. And when I got home, I found 4 mated queens all together in that hive. And I took those 4 mated queens and I put them in individual cages. And I dumped all the bees out over the 5 mated queens into their own 5-frame nucleus boxes, right? So I figured, well, I'm going to win. I've got 5 hives now. The next morning, all the bees tried to squeeze in with 1 queen. And they just let the other 3 queens die. So don't know the generations of if it was a mother or a great-grandmother or a great-great-grandma. I have no idea what the whole system was going on in there, or if it was because there was all of these compartments in the removal that caused the pheromones to get blocked and all the bees were just tolerating everybody, or what it was.
All right, Monica, hey, I appreciate your time a ton. If anybody wants to find you, monicamking.com. Thanks again for joining us on Bee Love Beekeeping, presented by Mann Lake. Another big thank you goes to Vita Bee Health for their support. Vita's varroa control range of products includes Apistan, Epigard, and now Varoxan, extended release oxalic acid strips. Hey, thanks a lot, guys. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to and follow the show, tell your friends about it, and click on over to beelovebeekeeping.com to sign up for our free newsletter. If you have a guest suggestion or topic you'd like discussed on the show, shoot me an email, eric@beelovebeekeeping.com. And remember, if you're not just in it for the honey or the money, you're in it for the love. See you next week.